Imagine a world without smartphones, democracy, or even agriculture. Hard to picture, isn't it? Yet, at various points in history, these concepts were revolutionary, quite literally. Today, we're embarking on a journey through time, exploring revolutions that reshaped our world in ways we still feel today. From the fields of ancient Mesopotamia to the digital landscapes of Silicon Valley, these upheavals didn't just change history, they redefined what it means to be human. Have you ever wondered how different your life would be if these revolutions never happened? By the end of this video, you'll not only understand how these monumental shifts shaped our past, but you'll also see their legacy in your everyday life. You'll gain insights that few people truly appreciate, connecting dots across millennia of human progress. If you're ready to challenge your understanding of history and see the world through new eyes, hit that subscribe button. It not only supports our channel, but ensures you don't miss out on more mind-expanding content like this. Now, let's dive into the revolutions that changed everything. The Neolithic Revolution. The Neolithic Revolution ushered in a cascade of profound changes that reshaped human culture and society in ways our hunter-gatherer ancestors could scarcely have imagined. As people settled into permanent dwellings, the landscape of human habitation transformed dramatically. The first villages sprouted from the fertile soils, their mud brick houses clustered together for safety and community. Over time, these settlements grew into towns and eventually blossomed into the world's first cities. Jericho, nestled in the Jordan Valley, stands as a testament to this transformation. Dating back to around 9000 BCE, its ancient walls and tower bear witness to the dawn of urban life. This new sedentary lifestyle demanded innovative solutions to novel problems. Ingenious tools emerged to support the agricultural way of life. Imagine the first farmer, fashioning a curved sickle from flint to harvest the golden wheat, or a potter shaping clay vessels to store the precious grains through lean times. Stone mortars and pestles ground flour for bread, while polished axes felled trees to clear land for crops. Each invention was a step towards a more complex and interconnected society. As agriculture yielded surpluses, the very fabric of society began to change. No longer did everyone need to focus solely on food production. This surplus allowed for specialization, giving rise to craftsmen, traders, and religious leaders. A new social hierarchy emerged, with an elite class overseeing food distribution and community decisions. In the shadows of the first ziggurats and temples, priests interpreted the will of the gods, their power growing alongside the increasingly complex religious beliefs that agricultural societies developed. These new belief systems often centered around fertility and the cycles of nature, crucial concerns for societies dependent on crops. Gods and goddesses of rain, sun, and harvest became central figures in elaborate mythologies. Rituals and festivals marked the changing seasons, binding communities together in shared celebration and worship. The remains of ancient shrines and sacrificial altars speak to us across millennia of the deep spiritual changes wrought by the agricultural revolution. Trade networks began to crisscross the landscape, initially between nearby settlements but eventually spanning vast distances. Imagine a trader from Çatalhöyük in ancient Anatolia, his pack laden with obsidian tools, traveling to exchange his wares for shells from the distant Mediterranean. These trade routes became the arteries of early civilizations, carrying not just goods but ideas, technologies, and cultural practices across vast distances. The concept of property took root as people invested time and effort into cultivating specific areas. Land, once seen as a common resource like the air or the rivers, became something that could be owned, divided, and passed down through generations. This shift laid the groundwork for future economic systems and social structures, its echoes still reverberating in our modern notions of ownership and wealth. Yet, This revolution came with its own set of challenges. As humans lived in closer proximity to each other and to domesticated animals, new diseases emerged and spread rapidly through dense populations. The diversity of diets narrowed, leading to nutritional deficiencies that left telltale marks on the bones of Neolithic farmers. The rise of social hierarchies planted the seeds of inequality that would grow and evolve throughout human history. Despite these challenges, the Neolithic Revolution set humanity on a new course. It laid the foundation for writing systems, as the need to record transactions and ownership gave birth to the first scripts. It allowed for the accumulation of knowledge and resources that would fuel future innovations. From the humble beginnings of those first planted seeds grew the complex tapestry of human civilization, with all its triumphs and tribulations. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in our species' journey, we're reminded of the profound impact our choices can have on the future. The ancient farmers who first tilled the soil could never have foreseen the world their actions would create. In much the same way, our decisions today about technology, the environment, and how we structure our societies will shape the world inherited by generations to come. The story of the Neolithic Revolution is not just a tale of our past, but a mirror reflecting our present and a window into our possible futures. The Industrial Revolution. Our journey through time now brings us to the late 18th century, to the green fields and smoky towns of England. The world is on the brink of another massive transformation, one that would reshape not just how we work, but how we live, think, and interact with our environment. Welcome to the Industrial Revolution. Picture a typical English village in 1750. Life revolves around agriculture and small-scale manufacturing in homes. The rhythm of life is dictated by the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun. But within a few decades, this pastoral scene would be transformed by belching factories, chugging steam engines, and bustling cities. The change is so profound that it's as if someone has pressed fast forward on the pace of human progress. At the heart of this revolution is a series of technological innovations. The story often begins with the steam engine, perfected by James Watt in 1769. Imagine standing before this marvel of engineering, feeling the ground shake as pistons pump and gears turn, converting the power of steam into mechanical energy. This invention would soon power everything from textile mills to locomotives, factories to steamships. But the steam engine was just one piece of the puzzle. In the textile industry, inventions like the spinning jenny, the water frame, and the power loom transformed the production of cloth. A single worker could now produce as much yarn in a day as dozens of hand spinners. The clattering of these machines in vast factories became the soundtrack of the new industrial age. As production soared, so did the need for raw materials and new markets. This drove a cycle of exploration, trade, and often exploitation. Cotton from the American South fed the mills of Manchester. British textiles clothed the world. The tentacles of industry reached across the globe, reshaping economies and societies far beyond the shores of England. The revolution quickly spread beyond textiles. Iron production soared with new techniques like puddling and rolling. The dark, satanic mills of William Blake's poetry rose alongside blast furnaces and coal mines. The very landscape was transformed as forests were felled for fuel and countryside carved up for canals and railways. This revolution wasn't just about new gadgets and factories. It fundamentally changed how people lived and worked. Imagine being a farmer or a weaver, with skills passed down through generations, suddenly finding your livelihood threatened by machines. Millions of people moved from rural areas to cities, trading fields for factories. The population of Manchester, for example, exploded from around 20,000 in 1750 to over 300,000 by 1850. Urban life brought its own challenges. Cities grew faster than infrastructure could cope. Overcrowding, poor sanitation, and pollution led to outbreaks of cholera and other diseases. The stark contrast between the wealth of factory owners and the poverty of workers gave rise to new social tensions. Children as young as 5 or 6 worked long hours in dangerous conditions. It was a time of great progress, but also of great hardship for many. Yet from this tumult emerged new ideas and movements. Labor unions formed to fight for workers' rights. Social reformers campaigned for better living conditions and restrictions on child labor. The seeds of the modern environmental movement were planted as people began to recognize the impact of unchecked industrialization on the natural world. The Industrial Revolution brought about unprecedented economic growth and improved living standards for many. The availability of cheap, mass-produced goods democratized consumption. Items that were once luxuries became affordable to the masses. At the same time, the growing middle class fueled demand for education, literature, and the arts. The echoes of the Industrial Revolution still reverberate today. Our modern consumer society, with its mass-produced goods and global supply chains, is a direct descendant of this period. The environmental challenges we face, from climate change to resource depletion, have their roots in the fossil fuel-driven industrialization that began in the 18th century. But perhaps the most significant legacy of the Industrial Revolution is the pace of change it unleashed. Technological innovation, which had once crawled along at a glacial pace, suddenly accelerated. This set the stage for the rapid changes that would characterize the modern world, from the automobile to the internet. As we stand on the brink of what some call the Fourth Industrial Revolution, characterized by artificial intelligence, automation, and biotechnology, the lessons of the First Industrial Revolution remain relevant. How do we balance economic progress with social welfare and environmental sustainability? How do we ensure that the benefits of technological advancement are shared equitably? These are questions we continue to grapple with, echoing the challenges faced by our ancestors 2 centuries ago. The Industrial Revolution reminds us of humanity's incredible capacity for innovation and adaptation. It shows us how profoundly we can reshape our world, for better and for worse. As we face the challenges of our own era, we would do well to remember both the triumphs and the pitfalls of this transformative period in human history. The American Revolution. As the Industrial Revolution was reshaping the economic landscape of Europe, another revolution was brewing across the Atlantic, one that would redefine the relationship between governments and the governed, and spark a global conversation about liberty, equality, and self-determination. The year is 1763. The British Empire stands triumphant after the 7 Years' War, having defeated France and Spain to become the dominant power in North America. But victory comes at a price, and the British government looks to its American colonies to help foot the bill. This decision would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the birth of a new nation and a new model of governance. Imagine yourself as a colonist in Boston or Philadelphia. You've grown up considering yourself a British subject, proud of your heritage and loyal to the crown. But increasingly, you feel a disconnect between your daily reality and the decisions being made by a government an ocean away. The taxes and restrictions imposed by Parliament, the Sugar Act, the Currency Act, the infamous Stamp Act, feel arbitrary and unjust. The rallying cry of no taxation without representation begins to echo through the colonies. These grievances don't emerge in a vacuum. The intellectual soil has been prepared by Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, who argued for natural rights and the social contract between governments and the governed. Colonial leaders like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin are well versed in these ideas. They begin to envision a society built on reason, individual liberty, and representative government. Tensions escalate over the next decade. The Boston Tea Party of 1773, where colonists dumped British tea into the harbor to protest taxes, becomes a symbolic act of defiance. The British respond with the coercive acts, which the colonists dub the Intolerable Acts. Militias begin to form and store weapons. The air is thick with the possibility of conflict. In April 1775, that possibility becomes reality. British troops march to Concord to seize a cache of weapons. The shot heard round the world is fired on Lexington Green, and the American Revolutionary War begins. What starts as a series of skirmishes between colonial militias and British regulars soon escalates into a full-scale war for independence. Picture the Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia in the sweltering summer of 1776. After intense debate, they take the radical step of declaring independence from Great Britain. Thomas Jefferson's stirring words in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," articulate a vision of human rights and government by consent that would inspire revolutionaries for generations to come. The war that follows is a David versus Goliath struggle. The ragtag Continental Army, led by George Washington, faces off against the mightiest military force of the age. There are moments of despair, like the brutal winter at Valley Forge, and moments of triumph, like the victory at Saratoga that brings France into the war on the American side. Finally, in 1781, with the help of French naval forces, Washington's army traps British General Cornwallis at Yorktown, forcing his surrender and effectively ending the war. But winning independence is just the beginning. The real revolution lies in what comes next, the attempt to create a new form of government based on Republican principles. The Articles of Confederation, the new nation's first governing document, proves too weak to address the country's challenges. In 1787, delegates gather in Philadelphia to revise the Articles, but instead produce an entirely new constitution. This constitution represents a radical experiment in self-governance. It establishes a federal system with power divided between national and state governments. It separates powers between executive, legislative, and judicial branches to prevent anyone from becoming too powerful. And it includes a Bill of Rights to protect individual liberties. The impact of the American Revolution extended far beyond the borders of the new United States. It inspired revolutionaries and democracy movements around the world, from France to Latin America. The idea that people have the right to choose their own government and that leaders should be accountable to the people they serve was revolutionary in an age of monarchies and empires. Today, democratic governance is considered the norm in much of the world, a far cry from the age of absolute monarchies that the American revolutionaries rebelled against. The idea that government derives its power from the consent of the governed, enshrined in the U.S. Constitution has become a foundational principle of modern democracy. But the American Revolution also left us with ongoing challenges. The tension between individual liberty and collective good, the struggle to create a truly inclusive democracy, the debate over the proper role of government. These are issues that Americans, and indeed people around the world, continue to grapple with. As we reflect on the American Revolution, we're reminded of the power of ideas to change the world. We're also reminded that revolutions are messy, complex affairs, often falling short of their loftiest ideals. The contradiction between the Declaration's assertion that all men are created equal and the continuation of slavery in the new republic is a stark example of this complexity. The story of the American Revolution is not just about the past. It's a living legacy that continues to shape our present and future. As we face the challenges of our own time, from threats to democracy to issues of social justice, we can draw inspiration and lessons from this pivotal moment in history when a group of colonists dared to imagine a new way of governing themselves. The French Revolution. Just a few years after the American Revolution, another seismic shift in governance was about to rock the world. this time in the heart of Europe. The French Revolution would prove to be one of the most consequential events in modern history, reshaping not just France, but the entire continent and beyond. It's 1789, and France is a powder keg ready to explode. The country, once the most powerful in Europe, is facing a severe economic crisis. Years of poor harvests have led to widespread hunger. The monarchy and nobility live in luxury at Versailles, while the common people struggle to survive. The Enlightenment ideas that helped spark the American Revolution have taken root here too, challenging the very foundations of the old order. Imagine being a Parisian on July 14, 1789. The city is in turmoil, bread prices have soared, and rumors of an impending military crackdown are rife. You find yourself part of a crowd surging towards the Bastille, a medieval fortress that serves as both a prison and an armory. This imposing structure symbolizes royal authority and oppression. As the crowd storms the Bastille, you're not just attacking a building, you're striking a blow against the entire system of absolute monarchy. This moment would be celebrated for generations to come as the start of the French Revolution. The fall of the Bastille unleashes a wave of revolutionary fervor. Within weeks, the National Assembly abolishes feudalism and adopts the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a document heavily influenced by the American Declaration of Independence. Its opening lines proclaim, "Men are born and remain free and equal in rights." These words represent a radical challenge to the old hierarchical order. But unlike the American Revolution, which largely maintained existing power structures with a change in leadership, the French Revolution aims for a complete overhaul of society. The revolutionaries' battle cry of liberté, égalité, fraternité, liberty, equality, fraternity encapsulates their vision for a new social order. The pace of change is dizzying. The monarchy is stripped of its absolute power, and France becomes a constitutional monarchy. The Catholic Church, long a pillar of the old regime, sees its privileges revoked and its lands nationalized. A complete reorganization of the country's administrative divisions erases centuries-old provincial identities. However, the revolution soon faces both internal and external threats. Conservative forces within France resist the changes, while other European monarchs, fearful that revolutionary ideas might spread, prepare for war. In 1792, faced with the threat of invasion, the revolution radicalizes. The monarchy is abolished, and France is declared a republic. King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette are eventually executed by guillotine, shocking Europe and marking a point of no return for the revolution. What follows is one of the most controversial periods of the revolution, the Reign of Terror. Led by Maximilien Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, this phase sees thousands of perceived enemies of the revolution executed. The revolutionaries' utopian vision descends into paranoia and violence. Imagine the fear gripping Paris as the guillotine claims victim after victim, from aristocrats to former revolutionary leaders now deemed insufficiently radical. The terror eventually consumes its own architects, with Robespierre himself meeting his end on the guillotine. The revolution enters a more moderate phase, but the country remains unstable. This instability creates the conditions for the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, a brilliant military commander who seizes power in a coup in 1799. Napoleon's rule marks both the culmination and the end of the revolution. He consolidates many revolutionary reforms in the Napoleonic Code, which guarantees equality before the law and protects property rights. But he also establishes an authoritarian regime and crowns himself emperor, seemingly betraying the republican ideals of the revolution. The impact of the French Revolution extended far beyond France's borders. Napoleon's conquests spread revolutionary ideals across Europe, accelerating the decline of absolute monarchies and feudal systems. The revolution inspired independence movements in Latin America and fueled debates about rights, citizenship, and the role of government that continue to this day. The legacy of the French Revolution is complex and far-reaching. It popularized concepts like citizenship, nationalism, and secularism that continue to shape our world. The metric system, adopted during the Revolution, is now used globally. The Revolution's emphasis on reason led to reforms in education and the standardization of the French language. However, the French Revolution also left us with cautionary tales about the potential for idealistic movements to descend into violence and dictatorship. It raises questions that we still grapple with. How do we balance the desire for rapid change with the need for stability? How do we create a society that truly lives up to ideals of liberty and equality? As we reflect on the French Revolution, we're reminded of the power of ideas to reshape societies and the complexity of social change. The Revolution's triumphs and tragedies, its noble ideals and brutal realities, continue to fascinate and inform us. In many ways, we are still living in the world it created, grappling with the fundamental questions it raised about the nature of government, the rights of citizens, and the meaning of equality. The French Revolution stands as a testament to humanity's enduring quest for justice and equality, and a reminder of the challenges and pitfalls that come with radical social change. Its echoes continue to resonate in our modern debates about democracy, human rights, and social justice. The Russian Revolution. As we step into the early 20th century, we find ourselves in the vast expanse of the Russian Empire, a colossus straddling Eastern Europe and Northern Asia. It's 1917, and Russia is a nation on the brink of monumental change. The Tsarist regime, which had ruled Russia for centuries, is crumbling under the weight of its own corruption, incompetence, and the strains of World War I. Imagine yourself in St. Petersburg, soon to be renamed Petrograd, in February 1917. The city is gripped by chaos. Food shortages have pushed people to the brink of starvation. Workers are striking, soldiers are deserting, and the air is thick with revolutionary fervor. The Tsar's authority, once absolute, now hangs by a thread. On February 23rd, March 8th in the Western calendar, thousands of women take to the streets, demanding bread and peace. This demonstration, coinciding with International Women's Day, snowballs into a general strike. Within days, the capital is paralyzed. Soldiers, asked to fire on the protesters, instead join them. The February Revolution has begun. Tsar Nicholas II, isolated at military headquarters and seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation, is forced to abdicate. A provisional government is formed, bringing to an end 3 centuries of Romanov rule. For a moment, it seems that Russia might follow a path similar to other European constitutional monarchies. But the provisional government, led by liberals and moderate socialists, faces a fundamental problem. It decides to continue Russia's participation in World War I, a deeply unpopular decision. Moreover, it delays addressing the pressing issues of land reform and workers' rights, losing support among the peasants and urban workers. Enter Vladimir Lenin, leader of the Bolshevik faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. Returning from exile in April, Lenin galvanizes the revolutionary left with his April theses, calling for all power to the Soviets, the councils of workers, soldiers, and peasants that had sprung up alongside the provisional government. Over the next months, the Bolsheviks gain increasing support with their promise of peace, land, and bread. On November 7th, October 25th in the old Russian calendar, Lenin and the Bolsheviks seize their moment. In a nearly bloodless coup, they take control of key points in Petrograd. The provisional government collapses with barely a fight. The October Revolution is complete. What follows is a radical experiment in creating a socialist society. The Bolsheviks, who soon renamed themselves the Communist Party, set out to remake Russia from top to bottom. Private property is abolished, industry is nationalized, and a planned economy is introduced. The Russian Orthodox Church, long a pillar of Tsarist rule, is brutally suppressed, but the revolution faces fierce opposition. A brutal civil war erupts, pitting the Reds, the Bolsheviks, against the Whites, a loose coalition of monarchists, liberals, and non-Bolshevik socialists. The fighting is savage, with atrocities committed on all sides. Foreign powers, including the United States, Britain, and Japan, intervene, hoping to strangle the new Soviet state in its cradle. By 1922, the Bolsheviks emerge victorious, but at a terrible cost. Millions have died from war, famine, and disease. The economy is in ruins. The dream of world revolution has failed to materialize. Lenin, his health failing, struggles to consolidate the new Soviet state. After Lenin's death in 1924, a power struggle ensues. Joseph Stalin, the cunning general secretary of the Communist Party, outmaneuvers his rivals and assumes total control. Under Stalin, the Soviet Union undergoes a brutal transformation. Rapid industrialization and forced collectivization of agriculture come at the cost of millions of lives. The Great Purge of the 1930s eliminates real and perceived opponents of the regime. The Russian Revolution had a profound impact far beyond Russia's borders. It inspired communist movements around the world and set the stage for the Cold War that would dominate global politics for much of the 20th century. The Soviet model of a one-party state with a planned economy would be emulated, with variations, in China, Eastern Europe, and elsewhere. However, the revolution also led to immense suffering. The ideals of equality and worker empowerment that inspired the revolution were, in many ways, betrayed by the authoritarian regime that emerged. The Soviet system's inability to deliver on its promises of prosperity and freedom would eventually lead to its collapse in 1991. The legacy of the Russian Revolution is complex and still hotly debated. It demonstrated both the power of revolutionary ideologies to mobilize people and the potential for revolutions to lead to outcomes very different from those intended by their instigators. Today, as we grapple with issues of economic inequality and political representation, the questions raised by the Russian Revolution remain relevant. How do we create a more just and equitable society? What is the proper balance between collective good and individual freedom? These are questions we continue to wrestle with in our own time. The Russian Revolution stands as a stark reminder of the power of ideas to reshape the world and the often unforeseen consequences of radical change. Its echoes continue to resonate in our contemporary debates about social justice, economic systems, and the role of government in society. The Chinese Communist Revolution. As the dust was still settling from World War II, another massive revolution was unfolding in the world's most populous country. It's 1949, and China has been torn apart by years of war, first against Japanese invasion, then a brutal civil war between the nationalist government and communist forces. The country is exhausted, impoverished, and yearning for stability and progress. Imagine being a peasant in rural China at this time. For centuries, your ancestors have toiled under a system that kept them poor and powerless. You've lived through the turmoil of the early 20th century, the fall of the Qing dynasty, the warlord era, the Japanese occupation. Now, you're hearing promises of land reform and a new society where the working class will rule. These ideas, radical and hopeful, are spreading across the countryside like wildfire. The roots of this revolution stretch back to the early 20th century. The 1911 Xinhai Revolution had overthrown the last imperial dynasty, but the promise of a strong, unified China remained unfulfilled. In 1921, inspired by the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, was founded. Among its early members was a young Mao Zedong, who would go on to lead the revolution. The Communists initially allied with the Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, against the warlords who controlled much of China. But this alliance was uneasy and eventually broke down. In 1927, the nationalists turned on the communists, forcing them into the countryside. This marked the beginning of a long struggle for control of China. During the 1930s, Mao and other communist leaders developed their revolutionary strategy. Unlike the Russian model that focused on urban workers, the Chinese communists turned to the peasantry as the driving force of revolution. They established base areas in rural regions, implemented land reform, and built up their forces. The Japanese invasion in 1937 temporarily united the communists and nationalists against a common enemy. But beneath the surface, both sides were positioning themselves for the inevitable showdown to come. As World War II drew to a close, the stage was set for the final act of the Chinese Civil War. By 1945, the communists, led by Mao, controlled much of rural northern China. Their People's Liberation Army was battle-hardened and enjoyed widespread peasant support. The nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, held the cities and had American backing, but were plagued by corruption and low morale. The civil war that followed was brutal and decisive. Despite initial nationalist advantages, the tide quickly turned. Communist forces captured Beijing in January 1949, and by October there, Mao stood atop Tiananmen Gate in Beijing to proclaim the founding of the People's Republic of China. The nationalists retreated to Taiwan, where they established a rival government. With the establishment of the People's Republic, the Chinese Communist Revolution entered a new phase, the transformation of Chinese society. Mao and the CCP set out to reshape China according to their vision of socialism. Land was redistributed to peasants, industries were nationalized, and efforts were made to improve literacy and healthcare. The early years saw significant progress in many areas. Industrial production increased, life expectancy rose, and women's rights improved. But the revolution also brought upheaval and suffering. Campaigns against counter-revolutionaries led to numerous executions and imprisonments. In 1958, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward, an ambitious but disastrous attempt to rapidly industrialize and collectivize agriculture. The result was a catastrophic famine that claimed millions of lives. Then, in 1966, came the Cultural Revolution, a decade of chaos aimed at purging the party of bourgeois elements and reviving revolutionary fervor. Schools were closed, cultural heritage destroyed, and countless individuals persecuted. The impact of the Chinese Revolution extended far beyond China's borders. It shifted the balance of power in the Cold War, inspiring communist movements in other developing countries, while deepening the divide between the socialist and capitalist blocs. China's break with the Soviet Union in the 1960s added a new dimension to global geopolitics. In the decades since Mao's death in 1976, China has undergone yet another transformation. While remaining under the rule of the Communist Party, it has embraced market reforms and become an economic powerhouse. This blend of political authoritarianism and economic liberalization, sometimes called socialism with Chinese characteristics, represents a unique model that challenges Western assumptions about the relationship between economic and political systems. The legacy of the Chinese Communist Revolution is complex and far-reaching. It lifted millions out of poverty and established China as a major world power. But it also led to political repression and human rights abuses that continue to be debated today. As we reflect on the Chinese Revolution, we're reminded of the enormous impact that ideological movements can have on the course of history. The revolution's successes and failures offer important lessons about the challenges of rapid social transformation and the complex relationship between economic development and political freedom. Today, as China continues to rise as a global power, the legacy of its revolution continues to shape world events. It raises important questions about development, governance, and the balance between economic growth and social equality. Questions that are relevant not just for China, but for the entire world. The Cuban Revolution. Our revolutionary journey now takes us to the Caribbean, to an island that would become a flashpoint in the Cold War and a symbol of defiance against imperialism. It's 1959, and Cuba is in the throes of revolution. For years, the country has been ruled by Fulgencio Batista, a US-backed dictator. Despite the veneer of prosperity in Havana, much of the country lives in poverty, with a stark divide between a wealthy elite and the struggling masses. Imagine being a Cuban farmer or worker during this time. You've heard of a group of revolutionaries led by Fidel Castro, promising to overthrow Batista and bring social justice to Cuba. Their message of nationalism and social reform resonates deeply with your experiences of inequality and foreign domination. The roots of this revolution stretch back to Cuba's long struggle for independence. After finally breaking free from Spanish colonial rule in 1898, Cuba found itself under the influence of the United States. The Platt Amendment, which gave the U.S. the right to intervene in Cuban affairs, symbolized this new form of imperialism. In 1953, a young lawyer named Fidel Castro led a failed attack on the Moncada barracks, marking the beginning of the revolutionary struggle. Although the attack was a military failure, it catapulted Castro to national prominence. During his trial, he delivered his famous "History Will Absolve Me" speech, laying out the revolutionaries' grievances and vision for a new Cuba. After being released from prison in 1955, Castro went into exile in Mexico, where he met Ernesto Che Guevara, an Argentine doctor who would become a key figure in the revolution. In 1956, Castro, Guevara, and 80 other revolutionaries returned to Cuba aboard the yacht Granma, beginning a guerrilla war against Batista's forces. Over the next 2 years, the rebels, operating from their base in the Sierra Maestra Mountains, gained increasing support from the Cuban people. Their ranks swelled with peasants, workers, and students disillusioned with Batista's corrupt and oppressive regime. The revolutionaries' use of radio broadcasts and their Robin Hood-like redistribution of land in areas they controlled helped win hearts and minds. By 1958, the tide had turned decisively against Batista. The rebels' victory at the Battle of Santa Clara, led by Che Guevara, was the final blow. On January 1, 1959, Batista fled the country, and a week later, Castro and his forces entered Havana in triumph. The early days of the revolution were marked by popular reforms. The new government initiated land reform, nationalized major industries, and launched ambitious literacy and healthcare campaigns. However, tensions with the United States quickly escalated as American-owned properties were expropriated, and Cuba aligned itself with the Soviet Union. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, where CIA-backed Cuban exiles attempted to overthrow Castro, only served to consolidate his power and push Cuba further into the Soviet orbit. The following year, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, as the US and Soviet Union faced off over Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. As the 1960s progressed, the revolutionary government became increasingly authoritarian. Opposition was suppressed, and many Cubans, particularly from the middle and upper classes, fled the country. The US imposed a trade embargo that would last for decades, isolating Cuba economically. Despite these challenges, Cuba achieved significant social progress. Its healthcare system became renowned, with Cuban doctors serving in developing countries around the world. The country's education system produced a highly literate population, and Cuba's achievements in sports and culture far outstripped what might be expected of a small island nation. The Cuban Revolution had a profound impact beyond its shores. It inspired leftist movements throughout Latin America and beyond, becoming a symbol of resistance to US hegemony. Che Guevara, who left Cuba to foment revolution elsewhere, became an iconic figure of revolutionary struggle worldwide. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 dealt a severe blow to Cuba's economy, leading to what Castro called the special period of extreme hardship. Yet the regime survived, adapting to new realities while maintaining its socialist principles. In the 21st century, under Raúl Castro and later Miguel Díaz-Canel, Cuba has undertaken limited market reforms while maintaining one-party rule. The restoration of diplomatic relations with the U.S. under President Obama in 2015 seemed to herald a new era, though tensions have since resurged. Today, more than 6 decades after the revolution, Cuba stands as a complex legacy of the revolutionary era. Its achievements in social welfare and its defiance of the world superpower are lauded by supporters. Critics point to its lack of political freedom and economic stagnation. The debate over the Cuban Revolution's successes and failures continues to resonate in discussions about social justice, national sovereignty, and the balance between equality and liberty. As we reflect on the Cuban Revolution, we're reminded of the power of ideas to mobilize people and reshape societies. We're also confronted with the complexities and contradictions inherent in revolutionary movements. The story of Cuba's revolution offers vital lessons about the promises and pitfalls of radical social change, the enduring impact of Cold War politics, and the ongoing struggle of small nations to chart their own course in a world dominated by great powers. The digital revolution. Our journey through revolutions brings us to the late 20th century, the dawn of an era that would reshape human society as profoundly as the Industrial Revolution before it. Welcome to the digital revolution, also known as the Third Industrial Revolution or the Information Age. Imagine yourself in a typical office in the 1970s. The clatter of typewriters fills the air, filing cabinets line the walls, and if you need to send a message, you reach for a pen and paper or pick up a landline phone. Fast forward just a few decades, and this scene has been transformed almost beyond recognition. Silent computers have replaced typewriters. Vast amounts of information are stored in the cloud, and messages can be sent instantly to anywhere in the world with the touch of a button. The seeds of this revolution were planted in the mid-20th century with the development of the first computers. These early machines, massive in size and limited in capability, bore little resemblance to the powerful devices we carry in our pockets today. But they set in motion a process of rapid technological advancement that would accelerate exponentially in the coming decades. A pivotal moment came in 1971 with the invention of the microprocessor by Intel. This computer on a chip paved the way for the personal computer revolution of the 1980s. Suddenly, computing power that once filled entire rooms could sit on a desk in homes and offices. Companies like Apple and Microsoft, founded by young entrepreneurs in garages and dorm rooms, would grow to become some of the most valuable and influential corporations in the world. But the true catalyst of the digital revolution was the rise of the Internet. Developed initially for military and academic purposes, the Internet exploded into public consciousness in the 1990s. The creation of the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989 and the release of the first popular web browser, Mosaic, in 1993 opened up a new world of information and connectivity. Imagine the wonder of early Internet users as they first experienced the ability to access information from around the world at the click of a mouse. The sound of a dial-up modem connecting became the herald of this new digital frontier. Email began to replace traditional mail for many purposes, and e-commerce pioneers like Amazon and eBay showed the potential of online retail. As we entered the 21st century, the pace of digital innovation only accelerated. The rise of social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and later Instagram and TikTok transformed how we connect and communicate. The smartphone revolution, kicked off by the iPhone in 2007, put powerful computers in our pockets, making the digital world accessible anytime, anywhere. The impact of the digital revolution has been all-encompassing, touching virtually every aspect of human life. In the economy, it has given rise to entirely new industries while disrupting traditional ones. The gig economy, cryptocurrencies, and AI-driven automation are reshaping the very nature of work and money. In politics and society, social media has become a powerful tool for organizing movements and shaping public opinion, from the Arab Spring to modern political campaigns. At the same time, issues of privacy, misinformation, and digital surveillance have emerged as critical challenges. In culture, streaming services have transformed how we consume entertainment, while digital tools have democratized content creation, allowing anyone with a smartphone to become a filmmaker, musician, or writer. In education, online learning platforms and massive open online courses, MOOCs, are making knowledge accessible to millions who previously had limited educational opportunities. In science and medicine, big data and powerful computing tools are accelerating research and enabling breakthroughs in fields from genetics to climate science. Yet, like all revolutions, the digital revolution has brought challenges alongside its benefits. The digital divide between those with access to technology and those without threatens to exacerbate existing inequalities. Concerns about data privacy and the power of big tech companies have led to calls for greater regulation. The ease of spreading misinformation online poses threats to democratic processes and public health. As we stand in the third decade of the 21st century, the digital revolution shows no signs of slowing down. Emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality, and the Internet of Things promise to bring even more profound changes in the coming years. The digital revolution reminds us of humanity's incredible capacity for innovation and adaptation. In just a few decades, it has transformed how we work, play, learn, and connect with one another. As we grapple with its challenges and opportunities, we're shaping the future of our increasingly interconnected global society. As we conclude our journey through these 8 world-changing revolutions, I invite you to pause and reflect on the incredible sweep of human history we've just explored. From the first seeds planted by our Neolithic ancestors to the digital world we navigate today, each revolution has fundamentally altered the course of human civilization. But what does this mean for you, right now, in your daily life? How can you harness the revolutionary spirit we've discussed to create positive change in your own world? Consider this. What would it look like if you approached your life with the same innovative mindset as James Watt perfecting the steam engine, or Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone? I challenge you to identify one area of your life where you can spark a personal revolution. Is it in your career, your relationships, or perhaps in how you engage with your community? What old systems or beliefs are you ready to overthrow? What new ideas are you prepared to champion? Remember, revolutions don't just happen on the grand stage of history. They begin with individuals like you, daring to think differently and act boldly. So, I ask you, what's your revolution going to be? Speaking of revolutions and bold actions, let's take a moment to consider some of the most pivotal military engagements in history. If you're intrigued by how single battles can change the course of nations, you won't want to miss our video on the 10 greatest war battles in history. From the Battle of Thermopylae to the decisive fight at Stalingrad, this video will explore how strategy, bravery, and sometimes sheer luck have shaped our world. Look for it on the card that appears on your screen now. Your engagement with our content fuels our passion for bringing history to life. If you've enjoyed this journey through revolutionary moments, please hit that subscribe button to join our community of history enthusiasts. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What revolution fascinated you the most? What topics would you like us to explore in future videos? For those able and willing to support our work more directly, consider making a donation. Your contribution helps us continue creating high-quality educational content and bringing the lessons of history to a wider audience. Before you go, you'll see 2 more video recommendations on your screen. One delves deeper into the Industrial Revolution's impact on modern society, while the other explores the unsung heroes of the digital age. Both promise to expand your understanding of how we arrived at our current moment in history. Thank you for being part of this revolutionary journey. Remember, the power to change the world has always rested with individuals willing to challenge the status quo. So go forth, be bold, and make your mark on history. Until next time, Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep revolutionizing your world.